All right, so in our last little commentary, we were talking about the guardians. And so we'll kind of pick up again with the idea of the guardians. Now, if you recall, the whole purpose of book 2 basically was to make this distinction between the soul of the individual man and the soul of the city. Okay. And then we also learned that cities sort of grow from simple and self-sufficient to luxurious. So the city of luxury and the city of sufficiency. Okay. Now, as we read over those parts about the city of luxury, what we discover is injustice becomes a part of the city of luxury, and things get far more complex. We need a lot more people, we need a lot more frivolity, and we need an army, which we never needed before. So we need a big army. So what I want to do today is, in this episode, is put together all these things and prepare us for book 6, because we are going to skip over books 3, 4, and 5, and we're going to head to book 6 and 7. So, how does this tell us anything about justice, what we've read from books 1 and 2? Well, recall that we've heard different definitions of justice from Cephalus, right? And Cephalus told us that justice was telling the truth and paying debts. Okay. And then we looked at Polemarchus, who said that justice was doing good to friends and harm to enemies. And then we looked at Thrasymachus, who had said that justice was the advantage of the stronger. Let's go Thrax. So in other words, might makes right. In other words, whoever is in charge decides what is just. Okay. So Socrates went through and sort of, we refuted that one quickly, we refuted that one quickly, but this one had a little staying power. And that's what this analogy is all about. Still trying to understand that justice is not the advantage of the stronger, but that there is justice itself. Because remember, back to Parmenides, is and not. Remember all that kind of stuff? Well, there is justice itself, which is. And then there is the not aspect of justice. In other words, there are individual opinions of what is just. And these are much different than those. And essentially what you have here are these guys. They're just opinions. They're not justice itself. So if we go back to man versus the city, remember that in the soul of man you have a rational part that rules. You have the emotional, I'm going to start using spirited. He uses spirited instead of emotional. The spirited part and the appetitive part. Well, it's the same in the city, only it's a little more complex, but it's the same deal. You have the guardians, who are the spirited types. You have the economy, those who work for a living and produce wealth, and then you have the rulers. And these are the three elements in the city that correspond to those same elements in the soul. Now, virtues. There are corresponding virtues for each of these different levels of the soul. The virtue of appetite is moderation. The virtue of spirit is courage. And the virtue of rationality is wisdom. Now, if you recall, these represent the 4 chief virtues, or the 4 cardinal or chief virtues of the ancient world that we saw in the Gladiator movie. And they are wisdom, justice. He called it courage, I'm sorry, he said fortitude in there, which is the same as courage, and temperance, which is similar to moderation. So essentially, we've got in the city, if our rulers are wise, we've got wisdom. If our guardians are strong and courageous, we've got fortitude. And the economy, in other words, if the people, if the appetites are moderate and they don't go beyond their means, then we've got temperance. Then essentially we've got the makings of a pretty darn good city. There's one thing that remains, of course, and that is justice. And so where's justice? If you recall that in Book 1, Socrates had said that justice is the ability to allow units to function for a single goal, if you recall that. He said that injustice brings about civil war in anything. This is on page 143, line 352. Apparently then, injustice has the power first to make whatever rises in it, whether a city, a family, an army, or anything else, incapable of achieving anything as a unit because of the civil wars and differences it creates. And second, it makes that unit an enemy to itself and to what is in every way opposite, namely justice. Isn't that so? Now, in Book 3, he talks about justice is when all of these parts work together. So this is justice, when the unity of the parts work together for the whole. And the unity of the parts will only can only happen if these individual virtues are met. So, in other words, the economy, or in an individual man, the appetites, if the appetites get out of whack, if they lose moderation and begin to drive the whole soul, then you're going to get essentially addiction. And what addiction is when the ruling element of the soul is no longer in charge. And the addiction becomes what rules the soul. And so, same in an economy. When the workers, when consumption and money making becomes so feverish and in the luxurious city, what happens is the economy takes over and becomes the ruler, kind of thing. Likewise, in terms of the guardian class, and by guardian class, he doesn't just mean police and military. He means also the politicians, the rulers, those who are, I'm sorry, not quite the rulers, the ones who ensure that the rulers' rules are implemented. And these are the ones who have to know good and bad, both here and here. Well, these guardians have to be courageous. If they're not courageous, if they're fearful, well, then they're not going to do their job. But likewise, if they're more than courageous, so if they are greedy, or if they are full of bravado and more interested in their own glory than in real courage, because real courage is not looking out for your own glory. It's not Achilles. Real courage is when you face your fears because it is good to do what you need to do, even if it's scary. So that's what we mean by courage. When the guardians are courageous, they will maintain their place and they won't overstep their bounds. When the economy is moderate, it will maintain its place. It won't overstep its bounds. And when the rulers are wise, they will make good choices. Now, justice comes in the city in this. When the rulers rule and don't try to make money and don't try to be guardians. When the guardians guard and don't try to rule and don't try to make money. And when the economy makes money moderately and doesn't try to guard and doesn't try to rule, that's when you have justice. So justice in both the city and the soul comes when the aspects of the soul or the aspects of the city, so the classes of the soul, the classes of the city, each do their function with the proper virtue and no more. That is when you have justice, and that is when you have balance. Now, what it becomes of great importance is the role of the guardian. And when we're moving into the next two books, books 7, we're actually going to do 7, book 7 and then 6. Remember, the guardian represents, this is G for guardian, a unique place. Because this guy has to be both fierce and also gentle to his own. And so he needs to be able to know good and bad. In other words, the guardian has to be very much educated in justice. And so in order to know justice, the guardian needs to know justice itself. And that's the whole key to allowing the city to form justice and to maintain a sense of justice. And that's where we're going in the next two books. And the way to maintain justice is through education. And so book 7 is about education, and that's why education becomes crucial for the guardians to understand justice. And if the guardians don't understand justice, the whole system will collapse.